Hi everyone, my name is João Paulo Costa. I'm a volunteer of Consecutivos and I live here in Foz do Iguaçu, Brazil. I am a psychologist and I study conscientiology since 1996. Uh, I am a volunteer of conscientiology uh, from 2000 on. I never stopped volunteering. I used to volunteer in other institutions, but I am in Consecutivos since the beginning of this institution. And today we're going to talk about this subject, which is temperament and seriexology. Consecutivos study and research a lot about seriexology and retrocognition. And I studied temperament and I link those subjects because there is a very tight link between them. I will talk about both and I will do all the explanations about the research I do in this subject. First of all, I'm going to read a quick definition on temperament and on existential seriation or seriexology. Okay, temperament or temperamentology is the study of how the conscious behaves towards intra and extra physical events through the expressed manifestations and in his physical, energetic, emotional, and mental actions and reactions. So, temperament is the base of our behavior. Temperament is one of our paragenetic elements that we are building since we were, plants, animals. So we are building up our way of behaving and bringing the core of this throughout our lives. Nowadays, when we analyze our temperament, we are seeing and we are studying the result of everything we have done before, everything we passed through. So our experiences, good and bad experiences, result in our temperament. Temperament is a very unique characteristic of each one, and it's gradually modifiable, but it's not easy to do it. But we can do this and make it more dynamic when we think about our evolution and our traits and the way we manifest. So temperament is one of the things that help us to study our past lives because, as I said, temperament doesn't change so dramatically from one life to another. When we analyze our temperament and try to find out temperaments in the past that are similar somehow with our temperament, we can try to track and find out maybe a personal or a person that we were in another life. All right, now about seriexology, I can read something very quick too. Seriexology is evolutionary existential sequencing of the consciousness, successes, existence, and intraphysical rebirth and series. So it's not very hard to understand what seriexology is because it's easy to find in books or in the internet about issues about past lives and memories of past lives. Seriexology, it is the study of the sequence of our past lives. So we know that in conscientiology, we study that we have many lives, and we study that line. So this is the series of life we study. And the retrocognition, which is another topic that we study in consecutivos, it's when we remember things of our past experiences as well. But when we try to study deeply these issues, we see the complexity. This is it's very intricate when we see the past about that. So there are some topics, very specific topics that is very important to understand if you want to understand yourself, your temperament, and if you want to find your temperament or yourself in past lives. First of all, we have to understand our temperament, how this is. Temperament, it's not only the way we behave for everyone. When we born, we bring our temperament, which is the way we the core of our behavior. But we are, every time we born in different conditions, in a different country, in a different city, in a different family, sometimes in the opposite gender. All these elements make us a little bit different to behave, and we have to adapt ourselves to the all the environment we are in, the society we are in, the values their society have. So some topics are very important. First of all, when we born, we are children, we are more spontaneous, and it's some points there is more, let's say, it's easier to analyze a temperament in a child, because that child, it's more spontaneous, doesn't have much yet education, though it's growing up yet, and it doesn't censor himself. So a child, when you observe a child, it's the kids, they behave in a very freely expression. This is more close to the real temperament in the core of temperament than we are when we are adults. When we manifest as adults, we have a different manifestation it depends on where we are. Now, I'm talking to you, and I have to behave in a certain way. If I'm at work, in another way. If I'm at home, in another way. With friends, it's another thing. And if I'm in vacations, it's another thing. It depends on where I am. I have to behave and to adapt myself. Sometimes I have to be more formal, and sometimes I can express myself freely. So this is not the temperament. This is the way I have to behave for the society, for the others, to adapt myself, to be social with everyone and with the specific situations. The temperament is the core of our behavior. For example, if I have a kind of aggressive trait in my temperament, this trait doesn't just appear in everywhere I am, or every situation I feel more angry or something. the traits of the temperament, we hold that. We don't have these for everyone. When we talk about temperament, it's more private than public, but in certain points it's always comes out. And there are some small things that we can find the temperament, and we can study in a long term of the story of the life of someone else. So after the childhood, when we are adolescents, there is the consciential basement, which is a concept of conscientiology, which is we are a little bit more rebel, and we can see things about our temperament as well when we analyze our behavior during the adolescence and or someone else. But through the time, we are going to try to deal with this, and when we become older, we now can behave and hold the things that we don't want to show. And we get more mature as well. But when we get older, we have more experiences, and sometimes we are more free to express ourselves and more spontaneous, like when we were kids. And it's nice to see these as well, and easier to understand our temperament when we get older as well. Okay, so the age groups, the period of time, your age you are, makes easier or less easier to understand your temperament. And remember, when you see a kid, he already has some certain protections to behave in certain ways. But when you see him at home, where he can, behave freely and play and do what he wants, it's easier to understand his temperament. The next point I want to talk about is zeitgeist. And the zeitgeist, it's the what the society are thinking at that period of time. So, for example, the zeitgeist in the beginning of the 20th century, it's not the same zeitgeist as we have now. So, if I were someone alive in the beginning of the 20th century, I have different, issues to think. I don't know if I was in a war zone or something like that, but the spirit of time, which is the zeitgeist, was different. So it makes more difficult to understand when we try to find someone in the past. It depends on the zeitgeist, but when you understand the temperament, it makes more clear who that person is and how the temperament of that person you are studying is. So depends on where you were in the past life, you have more difficult or different tendencies, or different thoughts, or a different education, maybe different gender. So everything must be put in the scale to understand that, because we are not really the same. We have to, as I said before, we have to adapt to a time, to a place. So the zeitgeist is another very important issue about the temperament. Sometimes we were interested in something in the past, and nowadays we are interested in something else, but it's related to that thing with the past. For example, maybe in the past, uh, I could deal with inventions, just invention, invent machinery or something like that. And nowadays, I can be interested in technology, which is related one thing to another. Or, for example, in the past, I worked as a actor, and nowadays I work as a poet. For example, I write poetry, for example, which is art. Is the same. Is the same bias. We can say that. So we can divide these things as art or logic or invention, these things, but are very big clusters of activities we can see and try to find the temperament. We're not every time doing exactly the same activity. It is possible, but it's not the normal way. We sometimes do what we can, what we have in hand, or something that we find more interested, that it didn't exist in the past, but exists now. All right. There is another topic that is studied for a long time in psychology, which is our self-expression in terms of extroversion or introversion. This is very, very basic for the temperament, if you are more extroverted or introverted. An introverted person stay more quiet, doesn't interact much, but it doesn't mean it's not sociable. And the extroverted person, it's more outgoing, more communicate himself more. Then this is very basic but important, because we see that too easy when we meet someone. There's one interesting thing, because when we know someone and get along for a short period of time, we can say a few things about that personality and how this person behave in a superficial way, and how he is more introverted, extroverted. But it is hard to say exactly things about his or her temperament, because we hide these things and sometimes doesn't appear often, or appears in a situation that we don't plan. For example, in an emergency, if you are in a building and there is a fire alarm with, I don't know, many people, 100 people in that building, someone will run, someone will scream, someone will try to find an exit, someone will try to help someone else, someone will just, get afraid. So everyone has a different behavior. This is the temperament. In not normal or not planned or in an emergency situation, the temperament comes out easy. That's why I'm saying that we hold that thing. If I have, let's say, I am a very shy person, and this is in my temperament. As I growing up, I will try to deal with this because I need to be more outgoing. I need to be more outspeaking because I have to work. I need friends. I need a relationship. I need to interact with people. I have to live, and this is not comfortable to be shy. No one likes to be shy. So you can deal with this and get more outspoken, but in the next life, in the future, sometimes this will come again if it's part of your temperament. This is very related with this extroversion and introversion, because if I am more extroverted, it doesn't mean that I am never introverted. Sometimes I am introverted, but I am most of the time extroverted. And there is another one, a third quality, which is the ambiverted. So you have both. You are introverted and extroverted, and you know how to deal with this in a good balance. So sometimes you are introverted when you have to think better, you have to be more, in yourself, thinking and rethinking about anything, and sometimes you have to interact and spoken and talk more talkative. So this is both extroversion and introversion is very studied in the psychology, but ambiversion, it's not very much studied. It exists in psychology, but it's the best point, the more positive of them. All right. Another thing that we have to deal with is the gender. So in this life, I'm a man, but maybe I was a woman the last life. So it makes more complicated to deal with if I want to find myself in the last life. So sometimes it's easy for women to deal with this. I see many women studying about past lives, and they deal very easy with this issue. If they were men and they sometimes they find a personality of a man that they want to study, and maybe they were that personality. But for men, for our society, it's difficult. It's more difficult for the guys to study a woman. There are some, but they are very courageous to do that because it's our society values. It's normal. But anyway, gender makes everything difficult because the characteristics of each gender makes more confusing this study. Depends on where we were born. There are some facilities or not for each gender. For example, if you are a woman in Afghanistan, it's not a easy life. You don't have much freedom, and you can't express yourself very well. Sometimes you can't go to a school. So how can you find yourself in Afghanistan, at least for the last years, with this kind of repression and this kind of society? It's hard. And it's hard to say a temperament of a woman in a country like that. One method or one thing we have to do when we study personalities in the past is to read biographies. But there is not many biographies of personalities. Maybe I have many lives, there's no a line written about it. So when we have a very notorious personality to study, it's easier. Sometimes when you find biographies to study, and one personality, very famous one, sometimes have 10, 20 biographies, easier to understand and to study, because it depends on the biography. There are kind of, a way that were written. Sometimes the biographer liked and admired that personality, and he writes about him with a kind of a way that sometimes he hides the weak traits, for example, that personality, or change a little bit of the history because he likes it. He wants to preserve his image. And another biography of the same person is the opposite way. That biographer doesn't agree with the opinions, the ideas, or so. But there are some more realistic biographies as well. We have to read all of them if you want to do a very good study in the past lives. Reading all of them, we will find certain points that converge, and we can tie these information. We can gather the information and see what is in all of them, or what is converged about these informations. And when we read about man and woman, there is a difference as well, because women, there are differences in behavior, in societies, and in knowledge about the society. Sometimes there are significant women that society try to hide that personality. So the gender, it's one of the most difficult issues in these conceptive personality research. Another thing that we have to deal with is the preferences. But first of all, we have a question here.
It's my question.
All right.
Could you give us an example of a characteristic of temperament that change when I am a woman or when I am man? For example, a woman is more communicative. Could you give some examples of changing gender and changing characteristics because of the gender?
Okay. They could hear you. They hear you.
I think so.
All right.
I think so.
Okay. Women have hormones and changing in hormones that men don't have. So depends on the society. A woman can be more free to talk, free to speak, more talkative, and can be in the same level in society with man. And some characteristics of that. I think women in general are more, how can I say that, are more dynamic related with man, because they have to be. Sometimes women do more than men, because in a society, in a Western society, women take care of the family, and nowadays women are working much more out of the home, and men are working and as well as is doing things at home. But I think women become more dynamic than men, naturally more dynamic, and I think this is it's in the genetic of the humankind. So, is there anything else?
No.
Right. Okay. The preferences we have, it means a lot to find and to understand our personality and our temperament. Remember that personality and temperament are different things. Personality is more public, as I said, and temperament is more private. But our preferences, like what kind of thing we want to do, we like to do in sports, in entertainment, in study, in the professional life. So our preferences are almost the same in the lives we have. We have some cases that we follow of consecutive personalities that we see that very clearly that personality have one preference, and the next life, in the present life, the current life, have the same one, the same preference, and we repeat the things, and we repeat all the a lot of things, not all of it, but a lot of things depends on what we like most. Um, the way we like to live our lifestyle, we are more organized. We have specific values. It depends on family values or work values or personal preference. This is very peculiar for everyone, and this means a lot. This is very close to our temperament. Sometimes we have a family with a specific tendency, like if I had a family of lawyers, and they really want me to be a lawyer, but I don't want to be a lawyer, and I have another career. But my brothers and sisters and parents, all of them work with law. This means that my temperament is taking me to another area if I can do it. But if I have a temperament that makes me more insecure, sometimes I follow the same career of my family, not because I like, but only because it's more secure for me. This is a very important point as well. So our temperament guides us through our lives, and we can study our temperament of small things or emergency things like I told you, but we can study our temperament for the long life, the issues that we have passed through our lives. So what I have been done since I was a kid, and where this takes me to. So this is my temperament. If I am free to choose my ways, it's easier to understand my temperament as well. Another thing is the hobbies, the things you like to do besides your work, besides your friends. It's something that makes you happy, relax you. You invest time, money, energy in something that is important to you, and you just do for pleasure. You just do because you like. This is spontaneous. This is your temperament. Try to see your hobbies, the hobbies you had when you were a kid, or the hobbies you have since you were a kid. What kind of hobby you have? What areas interested you most? Not the things you wish or you want to do, but the things you really do, the things that moves you to do. Not because the money, like a profession, you can have a very good job that you like a lot, but you work there because the money. If you didn't have the money, maybe you don't do that. So hobby, it's one very how can I say, one thing that takes you to know your temperament better or your tendencies. And when you have a specific hobby, you will find people that like that thing. You will go to places and buy equipment, depends on what kind of hobby you have. So you converge things to that thing or to that kind of hobby. There is one question, which is here. Alexandre is asking about strong traits and weak traits. Are parts of temperament or personality? Very good question. Traits, we have strong and weak traits in our personality, and we have strong and weak traits in our temperament, are different ones. The difference is the traits in our temperament are stronger and have been building from our evolution since we were animals. But the traits we have in our personality, it's built, and we still it's paragenetic in some parts, but some of them we have to develop in this life. But we have all the instruments and the resources to do so. But the traits in temperament are more solid and paragenetic than the traits in the personality. Remember that personality is your way to show yourself to the world, and temperament, it's private, it's you. Like feelings and emotions. Your feelings belong to your temperament. Your emotions, which are more superficial, belong to your personality. And the emotions is the way you interpret your feelings that comes from the temperament. Okay? If you have any doubt, Alexandre, you can keep asking. All right. So I was going, coincidentally, I was going to talk about traits, and that's basically what I said to Alexandre. Remember that we have much more traits in our personality than we have in our temperament, because the traits in our temperament, it's like fear, for example. Maybe we have a fear trait in our temperament. It belongs to our temperament. It comes with us no matter where we live, the gender we are, or the kind of family or education we have. That trait follows us in every life. But we have to deal with that fear. So sometimes we are in our work or with our friends and in a specific situation that makes us more insecure, but we normally hide that fear and we cope with that. So we can overtake that weak trait, that problem, but it is strong in us. Okay? In our bodies, the mental soma, psychosoma, the energetic body, and the soma. We have the mental soma, which is the most sophisticated of the bodies we have. And it's important to understand what kind things we work with our mental soma, with our intellectuality, and with our discernment to understand each of the bodies. But mental soma, it is one of the important ones, because to work with mental soma, we takes more of us, takes more energy of us. And when we write something, you are interested in a kind of issue, it means a lot. It is somehow retrocognitive. For example, I am interested in temperament. I have a major in psychology, and I used to volunteer in conscious. And I am in consecutivas studying Seriexology, but I combine Seriexology and temperament. So it's my tendency in the mental soma. I study temperament. I like to study the behavior, the way we manifest. Consent geometry. I like consent geometry. I studied for many years in consent. I still study, but not in the institution anymore. So in terms of mental soma, I always deal with this. I always read. I always write about this. My entries in the encyclopedia of conscientiology are about temperament and the behavior, and most of them are about that. So let's try to understand our mental soma, because the mental soma shows us our temperament. And when you know, you are very conscious about what you study and what you're interested in, you can study better your previous lives. The same thing for the psychosoma. So emotionally, how do you manifest? Emotionally, how you are emotionally? You are more stable or not? You have a maturity, a natural, innate maturity in your personality, in your emotions. So try to understand this body as well. There's another question here from Alexandre again. So could say temperament traits are herited from the temperament? Yes, they are. We develop our temperament, and it is strong. And from the moment we were born, we try to have new skills and new traits. These personality traits are built from the temperament traits, so they come from them. So it is correct in your question. They come from the temperament traits. Okay, so we are almost in the end. We have only 1 minute. If you have any question, this is the time. If it's not, anyway, you can send us a question still. But I want to talk about the International Week in Cognopolis, this event that will happen here in Foz do Iguaçu on the August, from 25th of August to 3rd of September of this year. It's an ISIC event, and consecutivos will have a day of a course here. I'll be in this course, which is the retrocognitive self-research. We'll talk about retrocognition and self-research on the 28th of August. The information you can have information from the website www.iccons.org. iccons.org here. So I think that's it. I thank you to listen to me, and any question you can send to our website. And thank you all. See you next time.